Welcome in, everybody. How about this? A Thursday night edition of the Torres Sports Podcast. I am live. You can see right behind me if you are watching on YouTube. Live from Circa Sportsbook at the Circa Casino in Las Vegas. We were at Stadium Swim last night. Not going to lie, it's kind of windy out. It's kind of cloudy out. It's kind of cold out. So they said, Torres, come in here, watch some games, record from the sportsbook. So we are live. We appreciate your support. Come on in. We are coming on right after that insane, was it a buzzer beater? Was it not a buzzer beater from Marquette Villanova? That game goes to overtime. But we got ourselves a loaded show on what I believe is maybe the best day of the college basketball calendar. Everybody's in action, all the power conferences, and we're going to break it all down. We're going to talk Duke. I think Duke's kind of overrated as they get run off the floor against NC State at the ACC tournament. We're going to talk UConn. Oh, my goodness, did you watch that second half? I saw Arizona in person at the Pac-12 championship game. And so we are going to talk about all of that. We will hit on the bubble. And, of course, we will hit on the crazy coaching carousel. Jerry Stackhouse, of course, was let go at Vanderbilt. Mike Boynton at Oklahoma State. Chris Holtman gets the job at DePaul. And so that is the rundown for the show. We have a loaded show. Appreciate everybody listening on YouTube. We've gotten great turnout these last few nights, and appreciate everybody who's downloading on podcast as well. First off, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, please make sure to do so. Click that little subscribe button. Should mention, as I said earlier, we appreciate, just look around. Circa Sportsbook, Circa Hotel, they've taken care of me, producer Matt. We've had a great time, and this is the place to come when you are in Vegas. Watch games, hang out at the pool, hang out here in the sportsbook. It is unbelievable. If you're here for March Madness, check it out. If you are here for the Masters, check it out. If you're here for the NFL Draft, Major League Baseball opening night, as I said, a big setup coming not only for March Madness, but the Masters as well. Make sure to check it out. A couple other quick announcements, by the way. What do we got? First off, our bracket challenge is now open. You do not have to wait until the bracket comes out on Sunday, as the Aaron Torres Pod Bracket Challenge is live. All you got to do, go to bracketfanatics.com. Bracketfanatics.com, sponsored bracket, okay? Sponsored bracket on bracketfanatics.com. You'll see my logo. Click that sponsored bracket tab. You can sign up today. If you've signed up previously, your email will populate, so make sure to do so. We love working with Bracket Fanatics. This is our 4th year with Bracket Fanatics. It gets better every year. And here's the best part. $1,000 prize pool on Bracket Fanatics. Again, bracketfanatics.com, sponsored bracket, of course, named Torres. Before we get started, also want to thank our sponsor, BetUS. BetUS Sportsbook, incredible. We love working with them. We appreciate working with them. And they have an incredible offer for first-time customers, first-time users, not even first time, but how about this? Your first 3 deposits on BetUS, a 125% deposit match all March long. So go ahead, take advantage of it. Again, BetUS Sportsbook, we appreciate their support. With that said, let's go ahead and dive in to just an insane Thursday of college basketball, okay? And I'm going to start by telling you this. I believe in my heart of hearts that this is my favorite day on the sports calendar. Today and Friday, you have all the conferences underway outside of the SEC and the Big Ten. All of the best teams are playing. There's so much at stake, and this week has lived up to expectations. Just think about it. What are we talking about? It is now, we have passed midnight Eastern. We still got the Big East, the SEC, the Mountain West, the Pac-12. I think the ACC just went final. The Big 12 is still going on. So much basketball. Where I want to start, though, is this. And we are live from Circa Sportsbook. We appreciate them having us. Where I want to start is with the Duke Blue Devils. And it's funny, we've talked a lot about Duke over the last couple days. But it was mostly for the negative off the court stuff. It was mostly the negative off the court stuff with Kyle Filipowski tripping dudes. What was it? They were the Cameron Crazies were throwing stuff at UNC's players. But if you listen to Monday's show, I did say in passing, I said, are we sure Duke is that good? Duke lost to Carolina for a second time just a few days ago. And I said, are they that good? And so I bring it up because I thought about that. And really, when I think about Duke right now, this season, something has struck me over the last couple days. It is that sometimes you have to trust your gut. Sometimes first impressions do matter. And I go back to the first week of the season with Duke. Now, keep in mind, Duke was my national championship pick in the preseason. So don't give me this Torres hates Duke. He's a hater. He doesn't want to see them be good, blah, 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 blah. I picked them to win the national championship. But I watched them against Arizona at home. I know the final score was close. The game wasn't really that close. I watched them against Michigan State. Ugly game. They didn't look great. I saw them at Arkansas lose. And I said, I just don't see a lot of special with the Duke Blue Devils. And I remember saying in November and December, I don't know how good this team is, specifically the guards. Listen, we could criticize Filipowski for the tripping and the kicking and the, court storming, whatever. He's a pretty good player. But I said with the guards, I said, you watch all these other teams. Cam Spence, Tristan Newton at UConn, Caleb Love at Arizona, Rob Dillingham, DJ Wagner at Kentucky. Those guys, their athleticism pops off the page. Their ability to get buckets pops off the page. I never saw that with Duke. So why do I bring it up? It is because ACC tournament opener for the Blue Devils. They lose to the NC State Wolfpack, who are not very good this year. Remember, NC State had to open the ACC tournament on Tuesday. They were one of the worst handful of teams in this league. They have now won 3 games because of the fact that they beat Duke on Thursday night. And so when I look at Duke, again, I go back to the Carolina game, and I said it then, and it was confirmed tonight. I just think we all, and I include myself, because I had a few of you say, Torres, you picked them to – you said a week ago you put out 8 teams that could win the championship, and you said Duke was one of them. You've been overrating them too. Well, I am here to say, I am here to draw the line in the sand. No, Duke is not very good. They are overrated, and I think that they have been propped up by a mediocre ACC. Because think about Duke right now, what we know. It is now 3 weeks left in the season tops. This is Duke's resume at this point after losing in the ACC tournament. Out of conference, best opponent, lost to Arizona, lost at Arkansas. The ACC is as bad as it has ever been. They are getting 3 tourney teams. The only team that has the same resources, capabilities as them, North Carolina, beat them twice, including in Durham just a few days ago, when that was a game where the final score might have been close, but it never felt like Duke was going to win that game. And so you look at their resume. You look at what they've done. What have they done? Lost to Carolina twice. The only other ACC team that is going to make the tournament, Clemson, they needed a pseudo miracle to beat Clemson at home. They lost to Arizona. And right now, Duke essentially has one good win all season. That was Baylor back in December. And so when I look at Duke, I just think they're overrated. I just don't think they're very good. And I think we've all been guilty of overrating them. But tonight just crystallized it for me. There's nothing special. NC State was better. Nothing fluky happened. There were no injuries. I just don't think Duke is very good. I don't think they're going to have a very long march. I don't think they're very good. Hopefully Cooper Flagg comes and saves them next year and makes them relevant. But it goes back to me. We prop them up in a bad ACC. The ACC is going to get 3 tourney teams this year. And I think that's the part to me that really kind of stands out, is that there's probably a bigger conversation to have about the ACC. I think as we go deeper into the NIL era, it seems like less teams are truly competing. And so I bring it up because you look across the ACC. It is down. Louisville's terrible. Syracuse is terrible. Notre Dame isn't what it was. Wake Forest hasn't been good in forever. Georgia Tech hasn't been good in forever. Virginia is not as good this year. And I just think that Duke was propped up by beating a lot of bad. My voice is cracking. It's loud here. I'm sorry. I got games going on in the background as I sneak a look at the Marquette-Villanova game. I think they were propped up by a mediocre ACC. I really do. I don't think they're that good. I don't think they're going to have a very long march. By the way, also worth noting, did you see what Duke's social media did after the game? You want to know they're plummeting as a program? They're plummeting in terms of relevancy. They're plummeting in terms of mental touch. Did you see the Twitter account, the Duke Twitter account? They lose. What do? They turned off their mentions. Talk about a poverty program. What are you doing, Duke? You used to have pride. You used to slap the floor. Coach K used to fire up the fans and get people going. Now you're turning off the mentions, Duke. Now you're turning off the mentions. That's weak. I think Duke will be fine big picture. Cooper Flagg is coming next year. I just don't think this team is very good. And I'll be blunt. I think a lot of people, and I include myself, probably overrated them. Tell you what, this is what we're going to do. Producer Matt, do we have the word from our sponsors ready right now? We'll take a quick break. Word from our partners. We'll come back and talk the two biggest winners of the day, in my opinion, UConn, Arizona. Quick break. Be right back.
America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. Do want to switch gears. I want to talk about the biggest winners and losers of the day in college hoops. And I want to talk about the two teams that, in my opinion, I believe I was just absolutely blown away with, okay? Again, for people tuning in live from Stadium Sportsbook, Stadium Swim, we are off tonight. Hold on one sec. I got to do something here really quick. Hold on. Okay. All right, so I'm back. Sorry. Forgive me for that. But essentially, I want to talk about the two teams that I was most impressed by on Thursday. Then we'll get to some bubble talk, some coaching carousel talk. By the way, you can always drop your questions in to the chat. Producer Matt will get to them momentarily. And we appreciate, again, Circa Sportsbook in Vegas. It has just been such a sweet setup. We're here. We're having fun. With that said, do want to talk about a team that I actually got to see in person today, and that is the Arizona Wildcats. And I will say this. Torres has had a bumpy relationship with the U of A this year, okay? So in November, they win at Duke. I think they're the best team in the country. They roll through most of December. They lose to Purdue and Indianapolis. I'm not worried. They lose to Florida Atlantic. I'm not worried. Then they start taking weird losses. They lost at Stanford. Washington State, in hindsight, obviously wasn't bad. You lose a buzzer beater to Oregon State. And it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back with this program. But what I will tell you is that every time that I'm ready to give up on them, they put together an insane 40-minute effort of performance. And I'm just here to tell you right now, I truly believe in my heart of hearts that this Arizona team, I truly believe, can play with and beat anybody in college basketball, especially, by the way, when they play like they did on Thursday at the Pac-12 tournament, okay? So Thursday at the Pac-12 tournament, I took producer Matt down to the T-Mobile Center, and I said, we're watching some U of A basketball. They were playing Southern Cal, USC. Remember, Southern Cal just beat them like 5 days ago in LA. USC has a lottery pick in Isaiah Collier, who, if you were watching the game today, he was actually phenomenal. They got talent. They got size. They got McDonald's All-Americans themselves. Arizona ran them off the court. And I truly believe that if Arizona plays like they did today, played like they did on Thursday in that win over USC, they are capable of beating anyone in college basketball, period, point blank, end of story. First off, the thing that stands out about Arizona, they have size. They have all the pieces. Size, athleticism, toughness, physicality, length, skill. I said athleticism, but it is in spades. They can play big if they need to. They can go small with Keyshawn Johnson at the 5. Whatever you need from Arizona, they can give you. What also stands out, their top 8, listen, I can't say it's definitively better than UConn, definitively better with Kentucky, but it is right there with all those teams. Remember, this is who they have coming off the bench. Jaden Bradley, who was a McDonald's All-American. He was awesome on Thursday against who we talking about, USC here. They also have KJ Lewis, who, if you don't know the name, was Arizona's leading scorer, 15 points in that game. And he was their best player. He's a freshman. He was underrated. He is an NBA player. So you're really talking about potentially 3 NBA players coming off the bench with Krivas, plus the starting 5 of Ballo, Keyshawn Johnson, Caleb Love, Kylan Boswell, and, of course, their 5th starter, Pella Larson, who I'm blanking on right now. So I bring it up because you have really 4, 5, 6 guys that are going to play in the NBA. You have 2 guys coming off the bench in Jaden Bradley and KJ Lewis. Again, I can't sit there and say they are better than Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd, who are going to be top 10 picks, but they're pretty darn close. And you have 7 guys that on any given night can beat you. And so when they play like they did today, they play like they did on Thursday, they can beat anybody. Now, the big question with Arizona, of course, can they do that every single week? Because they are a team that, listen, even, I did the post-game show with my buddy Mike Luke, with Ben White, and I bring it up. Did we get a buzzer beater? Looks like we got a final, by the way. If you hear in the background, Marquette has beaten Villanova. We'll react to that there momentarily. But it looks like Marquette has beaten Villanova. Yes, so we have a final, Marquette-Villanova. Sorry, there's a lot going on behind me. But when I go back to Arizona, it just comes down to what Arizona are we going to get on a night-to-night basis? Are we going to get the one that we saw at the Pac-12 tournament on Thursday against USC? We're going to see the one that lost to Oregon State. We're going to see the one that we got in the Pac-12 tournament against USC, or the one that lost at Stanford. We're going to see the one that we saw in the Pac-12 tournament, or the one that at times struggled late in the season. But I'm telling you, I watched that team. They are unbelievable. The other thing that stood out, the Caleb Love redemption tour is real, and it is freaking spectacular, okay? So Caleb Love, listen, I got to give this kid so much credit. It clearly just didn't work out at Carolina. But if you want to know the dirty truth, he was basically forced out. He was not welcomed back to Carolina. They did not want him. He goes to Arizona. I don't know if he's the best player. He has moments where he does tries to do too much. He's a little inefficient, whatever. But I bring it up because I don't ever remember. There's a couple, I don't want to say never, but you think about Cam Spencer and UConn. But there aren't many players who feed into their fan base quite like Cam Spencer, or quite like Caleb Love, excuse me. Caleb Love, couple big shots. He's pounding his chest. He's screaming at the crowd. He's firing the crowd up. The crowd is firing him up. So I love the Caleb Love experience at Arizona, no pun intended. And I do think he is also that guy that I believe is capable of putting this team and putting this team on his back and getting them to a Final Four. No different than what he did at North Carolina just a few years ago. Thing with Arizona, it's about consistency. The thing about Arizona, it is, can they do it every single night? But if they can, I believe in this team. And remember, you got to love the pathway if you're an Arizona fan. I think they're going to be out west regardless of whether they're the 1 seed or the 2 seed. They play out west. That means they are going to have the regional in Los Angeles. It will be all Arizona fans. And I'm here to tell you, I don't care if you're Carolina. I don't care if you're Tennessee. I've been saying it for weeks. I would rather be a 2 seed somewhere else than have to play Arizona in LA. But that team, I'm telling you, they have every single piece that you could possibly want. Will they do it? It's up to them. But can they do it? Do they have capability unlike a lot of other teams? They absolutely do. Let's switch gears. Let's go ahead and get to the other team that, to me, excuse me, I'm screaming and yelling here. The team that, to me, really stood out on Thursday in terms of being dominant. So producer Matt and I went to the Arizona game. We did not get to watch a ton of the UConn game. UConn, they played Xavier, and they struggled out of the gate. I watched a little bit at the beginning. They couldn't do anything right. How about this? First half, 4 of 14 from 3. 4 of 14 from 3. 4 of 10 from the foul line. And they were still up by 1 at halftime. So that's when I knew UConn was going to be okay. I don't think I knew they were going to do what they did in the second half, though. How about this? Are you ready for this? I'm going to throw a stat out at you that is going to blow your mind. UConn shot 78% in the second half. That is unheard of. That is unheard of. 78% in the second half. Here's the crazy part. 6 players scored in double figures. Nobody scored more than 13 points. And then they also dominated the glass, plus 15 on the glass. 5 different players had at least 5 rebounds, including our buddy Hassan Diarra, who's about 6 feet tall. And so when I look at UConn, let me say this. I'm not going to put anything out into the world. I'm not going to say they are unbeatable. We've seen a lot of teams that are deemed unbeatable going into March. That's not what I'm going to do right now, okay? But what I will say, like I just said with Arizona, they will have a very advantageous path. They will go to Brooklyn next week, and then they will go to Boston. I don't see the scenario. They are not in the East region as the number 1 seed. So they're essentially going to have 4 home games. But what really stands out to me about UConn is the following. Is the fact that I'm not saying they can't be beat because they just lost to Creighton about 3 weeks ago. But what has to go right for you is incredible, because what stands out about UConn, a little like Kentucky, a little like Arizona, only with the consistency that Arizona lacks, is that UConn, they bring it every night, and all 5 guys can beat you on any given night. So I was texting a buddy of mine, listens to this show, UConn fan, and I don't want to put anything into the world, but to beat UConn, we're essentially talking about really like 3 to 4 players have to have off nights offensively. And then also remember, they're elite defensively with Donovan Clingan as well, now that he's back. So even if they have an off night offensively, the defense is still so good. And so it can be done. They can be beat. I still think the blueprint is what Creighton did. You have to be able to hit threes in volume, but you also have to have enough size to be able to handle them on the boards and at least be even on the boards. I just don't know how many teams out there can really do that. But man, oh man, I just think you put them in the East region, I think it's going to be tough to beat them. They are playing so well right now. They will play in the semifinals on Friday night, where they will play the St. John's Red Storm. UConn, 78% shooting in the second half. We are recording live from Circa Sportsbook. Let me get you caught up on a couple scores here. Florida is winning against Georgia. We got Colorado, Utah. That's actually a big bubble game. So let's go ahead and transition to the next topic that I want to get to, which is the bubble. Because when you talk about a day where so much happened, where there was so much going on, we got to go ahead and talk about the bubble in college basketball. And let's go ahead and start with the place that I just told you we were going to start. So I just mentioned a moment ago that UConn will play St. John's tomorrow. UConn will play St. John's in the Big East tournament semifinals. And what I am here to tell you, there wasn't a bigger bubble winner on Thursday than our buddy Big Rick Energy, Rick Pitino, and St. John's. So St. John's goes in against Seton Hall. They lost to him twice. By the way, one of Torres' best bets was Seton Hall +4, so great day for Torres. I'm about to go 0 for 3 unless Florida hits some freaking foul shots. But Seton Hall was a 4-point underdog. I thought Seton Hall was going to win this game. St. John's dominated from the beginning. St. John's won this game in a significant and dominant fashion. And listen, let's give credit to Rick Pitino, the Hall of Famer. Since he called his team a bunch of fat, lazy losers that can't play basketball, and I'm paraphrasing, they're 6-0. Beat Creighton in a must-win, huge game that got them rolling. Now they beat Seton Hall. Two things here. First off, in the short term, you know that St. John's is playing in its first Friday night Big East semifinal since 2000. Shout out to Bootsy Thornton. Remember Bootsy Thornton? Probably not. But he was the star of St. John's that year. But more importantly, this to me puts them in the tournament. I think they've even gone so far as they probably won't even have to go to Dayton. I think they win. They are in. You don't have to beat UConn right now. You're in the NCAA tournament. So much credit to them. So much credit to Rick Pitino. Again, 6-0 since that famous press conference. I got to give that guy a ton of credit. From the Seton Hall perspective, I don't think this knocks them out of the tournament. They have some great wins. They beat UConn. They beat Marquette. The net is not great. I wouldn't be surprised if they were in Dayton, but I think Seton Hall is in. I will say the team that's very interesting from the Big East is now Providence as well. So Providence, this was another game that I bet that I got wrong. Providence beats Creighton in a game they were up double figures in the second half. I thought Creighton had too many horses. I thought Providence was down too many guys. This was their third game, And it is their second game. My days are all screwed up. I've been in Vegas for 24 hours. It feels like 72. But anyway, Providence gets the win. I don't think they're in just yet. But I'll say this. They're playing a banged-up Marquette team tomorrow. And I can't promise you anything. I think they match up pretty well with Marquette. I think Providence matches up pretty well with Marquette. I think they probably have to win that game to get into the tournament. But credit to Providence, they keep their bubble hopes alive in a game that I just did not see coming. I did not think they were beating Creighton in the manner that they did. Credit to Providence. Creighton, really quick, I know they're not a bubble team. I mentioned this last night. I think there was a legitimate pathway to a 2 seed. That's probably not going to happen. And I'll also say this. It's a little bit about like what I said about Duke a minute ago. I was really high on Duke early, and then very quickly I kind of cooled on them, and then I talked myself into them again. To me, it's kind of the same with Creighton. I just don't think they have enough guys. They basically play 5 guys, Kalkbrenner, Shireman, Trey Alexander, Steve Ashworth, etc., Farabello. They play like 6 guys. I don't know that they have enough to make a deep tournament run, even though they'll be like a 3 seed. But, great season for them otherwise. I'm not totally sold on them. I just mentioned it. Let's stay in the Big East. Villanova played Marquette. So Villanova played Marquette. Villanova loses. Listen, I'm not going to criticize Villanova. I'm not going to crush them because they just lost to a good Marquette team, even though Marquette did not have its best player in Tyler Kolek. But you go ahead and look at Villanova's resume right now. They're 18-5. They had one really good win in the out of conference. They beat, two really, Texas Tech and North Carolina. We thought Memphis was good. They were not. We'll talk about Memphis in a minute. But with the loss, I think Villanova's out. I get that they have some really good wins. They have 15 losses. You just cannot tell me that a team with 15 losses deserves an at-large bid. They had so many chances, and they have really bad losses too. They lost to Penn. They lost to St. Joe's. They lost to Drexel earlier in the year. And so I think with this loss, Villanova is probably out of the tournament picture. Providence lives to fight another day, and I think St. John's is officially in out of the Big East. Let's talk about the ACC, because it was certainly an adventurous day in the ACC, and I've been talking about this game for 3 days now. Wake Forest and Pitt. This was a loser leaves town game, and the loser of this game was Wake Forest. Final score in this one, 81-69. I don't think there's much else to say. I've talked about Wake so much on this show, but the bottom line remains when you look at Wake is that the path was there. They beat Duke. They stormed the floor. They don't injure Kyle Filipowski, but they stormed the floor. The path was there for them to make the tournament. Then they end up losing 3 straight games, 2 of which they simply couldn't lose, Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. And now you came to the ACC tournament and had to win a minimum of 2, probably 3 games. Well, you win 1, you lose to Pitt, and I think your tournament hopes are done. From the Pitt perspective, I don't love the resume. I wouldn't be surprised if the committee tries to get that 4th ACC team in, but my hunch is that Pitt really, they need to beat North Carolina to feel really good about getting into this NCAA tournament, but Pitt survives to live another day. And Virginia survives to win another day. Needed overtime to beat Boston College. Not ideal. Virginia survives. I still think they're on the bubble. They will now play NC State. The thing that sucks for Virginia, beating NC State does nothing, and losing will hurt you. That is not going to be a good loss if Virginia loses. So it's a weird deal where if you had lost to Duke, it was almost better to play Duke than NC State because the NC State game is just not going to mean as much. Some other bubble results. I mentioned Memphis. I just want to get to them really quick. What a meltdown by the Memphis Tigers, okay? So I watched them against Florida Atlantic on Saturday. That was one of my best bets on Saturday. By the way, I had a great weekend with best bets. That was my only loss. Memphis against Florida Atlantic. I don't want to say it. They were not trying, though. They were getting killed on the glass. They weren't even trying to play defense. You could tell there was something wrong. They end up losing today to Wichita State. And you just talk about a team that just melted down in the middle of the season. Remember, this team was in the top 10. They won against Virginia. They went to the championship game of the Battle for Atlantis. They beat Clemson. And I still think, I've said it before, I think it comes down to the fact that 2 things. One, they did suffer an injury to Caleb Mills, a key player. I also didn't love Penny Hardaway bringing in the transfer from Kansas State, Naquan Tomlin, in the middle of the season. I just don't love messing with chemistry when your team is playing well. They never recovered. They needed to beat Florida Atlantic on Saturday to feel good going in the AAC tournament. Instead, they had to play on Thursday now. It was a quarterfinal. They lose. Any relevant games are over for them. They may go to the NIT. We'll see what happens there. Other bubble results of note, Mississippi State gets the win in the SEC. I think they're in the tournament now. I think they probably avoid Dayton. They're probably like a 10 seed. They're not going to set the world on fire, but I think this win gets them out of that. And then I also think in the SEC, Texas A&M getting that win over Ole Miss is big. From the A&M perspective, I still think you have to beat Kentucky tomorrow night to get into the NCAA tournament. Now, I don't love the matchup for A&M, but then again, I went over 3 on best bets today, so who the heck am I to talk? But Texas A&M, I still think probably needs to beat Kentucky to get in. I think those were the big bubble results. Kansas State was sort of on the bubble after last night. They lose to Iowa State, so I think they're officially out. And I will say in the Pac-12, we have a relevant one as we speak. Utah and Colorado State are playing right now. I'm looking for a score. Come on, FS1. Let's go. Colorado and Utah State. It's early in this one, so we don't have to worry too much. But whatever. Doesn't really matter. That is a game that we will monitor. It'll be on as we go. By the way, there is, according to producer Matt, 33-30 at halftime in that one. Also, by the way, we do have one other bubble game in the Mountain West. New Mexico against Boise. New Mexico is up 2 as we speak. I think if New Mexico wins, they're in. If they lose, they're probably out. So, hey, no pressure, New Mexico. Be pretty cool to have the double Patino in the NCAA tournament this year. They need to win this game, though. By the way, also in the Mountain West, UNLV was another one that it felt like if they won today was going to be an interesting conversation, but they lose to San Diego State in double overtime. So UNLV's season is done. They were great down the stretch, but didn't do enough. Colorado State wasn't really on the bubble, but they beat Nevada as well. Really quickly, because my voice is about to go here, let's get to some coaching carousel things. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. Forgive me here. Coaching carousel. 3 quick notes. Jerry Stackhouse, fired. I'll be honest, I was a little surprised by this one. I was a little surprised because, one, they gave him an extension after last year. But 2, on top of it, and this is the important part, I'm told, now we don't know for sure. First of all, Stackhouse thought he was safe. I've talked to people close enough to him. Like, I don't think he thinks that he did the best job in the history of coaching this year, but I don't think he thought he was out. Bring it up. He gets fired on Thursday after losing in the SEC tournament on Wednesday to Arkansas. I'm a little surprised, and I'll tell you this. Vanderbilt is a really tough job. Like, people make fun of DePaul. I think DePaul, relative to the other Big East schools, is a better job than Vanderbilt in the NIL era in the SEC. I know Vanderbilt can raise money, but it's just a weird setup, a weird situation. We'll see what happens there. The early name that seems to be getting a lot of buzz, Chris Mack, the former Louisville head coach, the former Xavier head coach. He's from that kind of Kentucky, Ohio area. So you'd think, Nashville's not far from him. But I will tell you, that is a tough job, a hard job to win at. But Vanderbilt has fired Jerry Stackhouse. Listen, I just think it's really hard. I don't think Stack was necessarily the perfect guy, but he is out. By the way, as soon as Stanford lost, we talked about it last night on the show, Stanford, they ended up losing to they won last night in overtime against Cal. They lose on Thursday night to Washington State. They fired Jared Haas, I think, before he even did his press conference. We'll monitor for sound, maybe right after the press conference, but it was like, boom, game over, press release, out. So Jared Haas is out. The Stanford job is a very interesting one. Remember, this is easy to forget. Stanford's going to the ACC next year, the Atlantic Coast Conference. But it's an interesting job. It's a very hard job, though. I'll say this about Stanford. It is not like other schools. I won't name names, like Duke, for example. Won't name names, though. But Duke, if you can hoop, they can get you into school. Stanford, it's the exact opposite. I'll give you a quick example. Stanford's best freshman had the grades to get into the school, got admitted to the school. And then I think in summer school, he got like a C or something like that. And they didn't let him play the first semester. They were like, the admissions and the administration was like, you need to prove that you're a Stanford man and blah, 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 whatever. It is a really hard job. The one interesting name that I've heard, Kyle Smith, ironically, the Washington State head coach. Remember, Washington State is going to the WCC in basketball. I think he's trying to get out. Kyle Smith has previously coached at Columbia, so he has done that high-level academic school. He's the name that I could see there. Last little coaching carousel note, and then we will get to some questions from the audience. We will get to some questions from the audience. But DePaul. So DePaul hires Chris Holtmann on Thursday, okay? This is interesting because remember, earlier in the week, Porter Moser, the Oklahoma head coach, was at Loyola of Chicago before that. A report comes out that he is going to be the DePaul next head coach. About 12 hours past, 7, 8 hours, whatever it is, he puts out a statement, I love my team, I love my school, I love my this, I love my that. I am told that he put out that statement because he basically thought he had lost his locker room, and based on how Oklahoma played against TCU in the Big 12 opener, I believe they did. I don't want to say that he was going to take the job. I believe it was probably more serious than a lot of people think. But Porter Moser's out. Chris Holtmann comes in as the head coach. Previously was at Ohio State. Now, what I'll say is this. I think in life, two things can be true. I think Chris Holtmann was a disappointment at Ohio State. They started out well every year, struggled down the stretch. We've gone over it again and again when he got fired, okay? And even this year, Ohio State won again on Thursday, is now in the Big Ten quarterfinals, and are 6-1 with this interim head coach, Jake Diebler, John Diebler was his brother who played there. So I bring it up to solely say that when I look at this Ohio State situation, I get it. Chris Holtmann was not the guy there. The team disappointed. They never made the second weekend of the NCAA tournament under Chris Holtmann. But I'll also say a couple things in defense of Chris Holtmann. One, I don't think he can literally be any worse than DePaul was this year. Like, literally, I don't think it's possible. They were 3-20, 0-21 in the Big East if you include the Big East tournament. But this is also a guy that, if you include the COVID year where the tournament was canceled, did make the NCAA tournament, would have made the NCAA tournament all 5 of his first 5 years, and won a game in 3 of those 4 NCAA tournaments, because remember, there was no tournament in 2020. Also, was at Butler before that, went to 3 NCAA tournaments in 3 years, including a Sweet 16. So, he's going back to the Big East. Butler has fallen off since he left, and to his credit, we're talking about of the last, 7 of the last 9 NCAA tournaments played, he made 7 of them, 3 in the Big East. Now, the Big East is tougher. There was no Dan Hurley, no UConn when he was there, no Rick Pitino at St. John's. Sean Miller at Xavier's a beast. So it's not easy. But can he be better? Listen, here's the baseline. If you give him 5 years, do I think he can make 1 NCAA tournament? I think he can. If he makes 1 NCAA tournament, he's getting an extension. And he'll get another 5 years to figure it out. So I think 2 things can be true. I don't think he was great at Ohio State, but I don't think that precludes him from being okay to good at DePaul. I think that's it. I saw the chat was bumping. Producer Matt, do we have any interesting questions to get to before we get out of here? What a show. Live from the stadium, No Stadium Swim Sportsbook. Matt says, could NC State make Dayton with a win over Virginia and a good showing against UNC or Pitt? I'll tell you this. First of all, I think you can beat Pitt. So, 1, I think you beat Virginia. The thing, Matt, I'll be honest, I think what it really comes down to, it is still going to be a lot of what else happens. What happens with Providence? What happens with this Utah-Colorado game? What happens with New Mexico, which is now up 7? There's a lot of teams sweating. There's a lot of teams you still have to jump. By the way, we mentioned Ohio State. Ohio State, you probably need Ohio State to lose, so they're not on the bubble. So to answer your question, I think even if you beat Virginia, I think you could beat Pitt to win the ACC, and that would be an interesting story. But I think you're going to need a little bit more than just that Virginia win. Remember, Virginia's on the bubble themselves. I'm going to grab another water while we answer these questions. Any other questions? Okay, hold on. I'm looking at the chat now. I see a lot of riffraff. Are you guys arguing with each other in this chat? Keep the same energy for Villanova. Yeah, it looks like a lot of you. Florida wins. Best game tomorrow, Florida, Kentucky. So, Paul, you're 100% right. Paul, Florida, Kentucky is going to be a thriller. Although we don't get Florida, Kentucky, we get Florida, Alabama. Am I right on that? Yes. Yeah, Alabama's the 3 seed, Florida's the 6, Kentucky's the 7. So we get Texas A&M and Kentucky. But Florida, Alabama, to your point, Paul, is going to be great. And I think Florida's going to win that game. I know I went 0 for 3 on best bets today, but I'm coming back tomorrow. That's already my best bet. I already know it. Let's see who else. Kentucky plays A&M. Yeah, keep the same energy. Kyle Neptune. Okay, so question on Kyle Neptune from Ernest, who I believe is our listener in Indonesia. Kyle Neptune, the Villanova coach, is not getting fired. I do think he will enter next year on the hot seat, though, okay? Because you look at, people say, well, Jay Wright needed 4 years. Jay Wright took over a poverty program. Kyle Neptune took over a team that went to the Final Four the year before he got there, and they returned guys. I know Justin Moore was hurt last year, but they had Eric Dixon back. Last year they had Brandon Slater back. They had Cam Whitmore. They missed the NCAA tournament last year. I think it's also worth noting this year they went heavy on NIL. You can search Villanova on Twitter. There are Villanova fans that are like, we spent $3 million on this roster in NIL. I don't know if that number is accurate, but Villanova fans seem to think that it is. And so I just bring it up because Villanova tried to do the culture thing last year. Now they went NIL this year. First off, I'll be interested to see if they can raise the same NIL. Because if you gave NIL this year and you saw the team miss the tournament, you're going to sit there and say, I don't know if I'm giving anything next year. So I think there's a possibility that Kyle Neptune, he certainly, I think, will be on the hot seat next year. And he loses a lot of dudes. He loses Eric Dixon. He loses Justin Moore, the 2 holdovers from that Final Four team. Loses Tyler Burton. I think he loses TJ Bamba. I think they basically lose everybody except for like Jordan Longino and Mark Armstrong. So I just sit there and say it's tough for him. It's tough for him. I don't think that they have much success. Tell you what, we got a great crowd. If Calipari loses the first weekend, he's 1,000% gone. I don't know that I believe that. Listen, I think in a perfect world, you don't want to lose on the first weekend if you're John Calipari. But I do think, listen, let me say this. He's not out unless he wants to be out. But it's going to be another long, exhausting offseason for John Calipari. Guys, I'll tell you what. I think it's time for me to get out of here. It is now almost 1 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm going to go. And we'll be back on Friday. We'll do an early morning show like we did today. Quick preview of Friday. And then we will, of course, do a full show Friday night, wrapping up our week in Vegas. If you're not subscribed to the show, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media. Aaron_Torres on Twitter. Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. That is all for today's show. Subscribe to YouTube. Thank you to Circa Sportsbook. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Shout out Torrin Craig. Shout out Rachel with my voice. See you then.